It's week 5, and despite a one-day delay, the stat chasing boys are back to take you through how all of the injury shakeups are going to impact your fantasy teams and how we can best take advantage of the new situations emerging in the fantasy landscape. This is Stat Chasing.
Pat Fryer Helmo.
This is why I'm hot.
Anita hand job.
Fix your sight.
Jamar Alpha Play Chase.
Are you kidding me? Kadarius Toney?
You can't handle the heat.
Pete, it looks like we're finally at this point. You're right.
Hello. Thank you for joining us tonight, Drico. Glad to be here with you. Despite our one-day delay, we're back in the saddle, here to take you through all the charts for the week. A lot of injuries this week. Feels like I'm sure that we do this every season. Oh my gosh, there's so many injuries this season. But man, with Richardson and Etienne and all these exciting players getting injured, it felt particularly brutal this week. I don't know how you felt about it, Drico.
Desolate, devastated. I've been really happy with my start of the season, and then and that's in large part high exposure to Etienne, high exposure to Justin Jefferson. One of my better teams has Anthony Richardson. So definitely been a blow, and my cope take is that hopefully some of these guys come back before the end of the year, and maybe those teams that were really good, they're just good enough to get them through, and maybe I can get some unique Justin Jefferson teams into the playoffs.
I was saying the same thing, and I was trying to make sure that it wasn't cope. I was looking. We just finished putting up the BBM4 leaderboard with all the player combos, and like you can see how people were drafting over at Spike Week. And I was looking. I'm like one of the people in the entire tournament with the largest amount of Etienne. And so I really was trying to make sure that this was not a cope take. But I'm pretty sure that given his price, where he went all summer, he's already done enough to like you would be happy with a player that delivered, spike weeks of that magnitude over the course of a season. Like, it's not a smash if he never plays another game the rest of the season. It's not a smash, but it's like that was enough. I got enough. And so my hope and my cope is I think that there's a pretty good chance he comes back healthy later in the season. And what we're doing is we're culling some of the weaker Etienne teams. And I tend to think that my teams in general are drafted stronger than the field on average. And so I'll hopefully be able to get a disproportionate amount of Etienne into the playoffs, especially since I have so much of him. So that's kind of my and I think you can kind of extend that to a lot of these guys that have, like, obviously Justin Jefferson, his draft cost was significantly higher, but he's already done a lot for you. Like, sure, Chase had that 50-point game, but Chase put up a couple stinkers while Jefferson was doing Jefferson things, and Kupp missed the 4 games. So I kind of think that these Jefferson teams and these Etienne teams, they might end up being okay. The ones that I'm pretty concerned about are the 2 quarterback Richardson teams, just because it does sound like that injury is going to be pretty serious. But if you happen to have your other quarterback, like if you've got like a Tua Richardson or like a Herbert Richardson, something where you've got a really strong other quarterback at cost, I think those could be really interesting come playoff time. Obviously, it stinks for regular season prizes or like drafters style format. We're just trying to accumulate the most points. Like in a drafters tournament, if you have Justin Jefferson, your team's dead, which is crazy. It's so crazy, the differences in the format. Like, oh, you have Etienne, it was like one of the best picks you could have made. Team's dead. Have fun, buddy. See you next season.
Right. Right. So let's I think we should get into the quarterback chart here. So gonna add that worked out pretty good. And so like always, this is a quarterback efficiency chart, and on the horizontal axis we've got adjusted yards per attempt, which is, it's kind of like yards per attempt, but it rewards touchdowns and punishes interceptions. And then we have touchdown rate, which is, I guess, pretty important for your pocket passers. They need to be thrown touchdowns at a pretty good clip. But then also it can also be like a volatility measure, where if somebody's throwing for good yardage but not getting the touchdowns, then that can possibly signal they could be in line for positive regression on that metric. And then the size of the bubble, because this is fantasy football centric, the size of the bubble is for rushing yardage.
Yeah, I when I was putting this chart together this week, a lot of the guys, held their trend. It was same that I expected. A couple guys did enough for me where I was like, okay, I need to reevaluate how I'm assessing this player. The first one for me was Brock Purdy. The way that I had viewed him prior to this week, and it certainly helped that I was paying a lot of attention to that game as I watched my Cowboys get absolutely curb stomped. But I think that what we're seeing with Purdy, and it makes sense, it translates with how the offenses compare and the similar systems, is he's just like diet beta Tua, right? Like he's not going to do quite as much as Tua, but they're being asked to do similar stuff. They've got these incredible weapons that can deliver huge splash plays and help sustain these high touchdown rates that you need from these pocket passers. Neither of them are doing anything on the ground. And so I'm starting to look at Purdy kind of as diet Tua, and I wish that I had come around to that during the offseason, because I would have drafted a lot more of him. And given his cost and where he went, he definitely looks like he was a strong pick. So I'm going to have to hold the L on my underweight Purdy position there. But that was one where I felt like I needed to, check my priors and make sure that I was still being rational there. Pretty sure it's, we're seeing signal, not just noise here. Like he's just
week 5. We've got a 5-game sample in here. Seems like he's good.
Yeah.
I guess one thing that I'm gonna check it now, that I guess people would say that is in favor of Tua, that is not for what's his name, Purdy, is kind of the pass rate. So just checking the situation neutral pass rate for Miami has been 62%, and then for San Francisco, it's been 53%. So I guess that's one difference where you would I think, given a choice, you definitely and you said this, you definitely prefer Tua, because they're gonna pass more often, but like we said, he Purdy's playing pretty efficiently. He's scoring touchdowns. He's getting strong yardage per attempt. So definitely at his prior cost, you are very interested.
Yeah, and we mentioned this earlier. I can't remember what week it was that we discussed this, but Purdy's volume is just going to be low. That's the way the offense is designed. They're not going to have him air it out 40 plus times in a week if they can at all avoid it. And they're a good team. They're going to be able to avoid having to do that. So that's his ceiling's kind of capped in that regard. It's not to say that ceiling games are inaccessible to him. Clearly they are, on the back of touchdown efficiency. It's kind of like, diet, there's no need to make other comparisons. Diet Tua is a totally fine and apt comparison there.
Yeah, for sure.
The other ones that we saw, the Jordan Love, I'm wondering if we get like a little bit of a Jordan Love metronome effect, because there's no way. I mean, he was so efficient the first couple weeks, right? We saw that and said he's going to regress, but now he's just like screaming back the other way. And I've got to feel like maybe he comes back and settles somewhere in between where he is right now on the chart and where he was to start the season. I'm thinking that, maybe with Christian Watson getting to be fully healthy and acclimated to the offense, and, you get Aaron Jones back, maybe the offense will look a little more efficient. But yeah, I'm wondering if we see a Jordan Love metronome effect there. Was there anyone else on the chart that you saw that you had a big takeaway on for this week?
I guess do want to be able to use the resurrection ADPs while we have them, because I believe the contest is closing soon. So Brock Purdy goes around pick 80. Obviously, huge closing line value there. But I'm now thinking, let's say, for example, Joe Burrow actually is a good example where he's now picked 72. And we see him right here around the 5 adjusted yards per attempt and pretty low touchdown rate. I think that's a comparison that's pretty interesting, where you have like one who's been really efficient, and then another who I think is pretty objectively more talented overall. Joe Burrow has been bad, and mostly because of the injury, probably. I think that's like an interesting, like, if I'm like trying to find ways, how do I play quarterback in resurrection, and how do I react to the market? I think I at the same price, even rest of the season, I prefer Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and it's because the ceiling with Burrow is not capped in the way that it's capped with Purdy, right? Like, your very, very, very best Purdy game is 6 touchdowns, right? It's like 300 yards, 6 touchdowns. That'd be like you're living in a dream. Holy shit, Brock Purdy just went nuclear, right? And while, like, sure, that's a pretty enormous ceiling. Like, Joe Burrow has those, like, I just threw for 500 yards, LOL games in his range. Like, in the same way that a 6 touchdown game for Purdy is really unlikely, but it's in the range. Like, that 500-yard game for Burrow is in the range. And so it's just, you're not capping your ceiling quite as much with Burrow. I think that is definitely the way I would want to play it as well. Not to say that the market is doing a bad job of pricing Purdy, as I kind of like let that ADP marinate in my head a little bit. It's like, yeah, that's probably right. You know, here's an interesting one. Brock Purdy or Trevor Lawrence rest of season. And I haven't looked at the resurrection ADPs. I've kind of sat that tournament out after my first few drafts. It just wasn't terribly appealing to me given the prize pool.
Right. Makes sense. I like to use it as a what you call it, as a
I think it's such a good
metric.
It's such a good tool to compare, market sentiment on players.
Right, so, but you want to be I guess transparent. I've done a couple myself, but have not been diving in super hard, but like to use it as a tool. Brock Purdy or Trevor Lawrence. I mean, given the last couple of weeks, I think I'm slightly in favor of maybe this is a bit contrarian. I'm slightly in favor of Trevor Lawrence, and I just think, again, you're talking about somebody who's much better, like overall more talented. The talent around Purdy is clearly miles better than Trevor Lawrence. Like, you've probably got pretty average talent to possibly below average talent around Trevor Lawrence, and he's been making. I think a lot of his advanced sort of charted stats have been really, really good, but the fantasy output has not been there. And so I almost want to say that's another one where, despite a pretty poor start, I do want to be in on like a Trevor Lawrence rebound. And so I'm probably slightly prefer like in a complete vacuum. But the market is actually has Purdy ahead of him. So Trevor Lawrence has picked 85 now. And so that's another one where I'm like, I like being contrarian there. But if someone was to make me be like super confident and like I have to spend like to draft Trevor Lawrence like a round and a half to 2 rounds before Purdy, I'm like definitely getting very angsty, not liking that. So I'm not trying to say that the ADP on Purdy is inefficient there. For example, he goes around Kirk Cousins, which, that seems fair.
Yeah. No, yeah, that feels about right. to me. It's kind of just the way that I would be playing that most likely is like that's kind of a range of quarterbacks where I think if anything, like Cousins and Lawrence might be a tiny bit underpriced with the way that the quarterback market has behaved this season, where everyone's kind of going a little bit too expensive. But in resurrection drafts where there's so much less ambiguity, so like you just get these much more like crystallized tiers of like, here's useful players, and after that it's just 50 miles of shit. So then I'm like, well, at that range in the draft, it's probably fine to take these quarterbacks, even though like technically I feel like the price might be a little high relative to like what a perfectly efficient market would be for where quarterbacks go with respect to all the skill position players. But like, yeah, I'd be happy to open up stacks for all those guys in that range and just take whoever falls to me and kind of play it that way. But I think honestly there weren't a ton of crazy things on the quarterback chart that I saw other than those ones that I wanted to point out.
I guess the other one that's interesting to me is seeing Russell Wilson in like pretty firmly in the good section of the chart. And I know I pointed out whereas this is a Russell Wilson positivism or bias chart where it doesn't really punish him for taking sacks from holding the ball too long, and like being able to hold the ball longer is going to push up your adjusted yards per attempt. But it does seem pretty interesting to me that he's been clearly pretty productive, and they haven't been winning, so I'm sure there is frustration in that team. But it's sort of like this, like if I told you that this was a 2015 chart and showed you where Russell Wilson was, you'd be like, oh, okay. Like,
yeah, no, that makes sense. And then I'd probably ask you, who is Tua Tagovailoa?
Right.
If we were in 2015. But yeah, no, I think with Wilson, he's just going to be one of those guys that's interesting for fantasy. He's a little hard for DFS because the stacking options are really not ideal with the way that they're using their weapons in the offense. Although I believe I saw, was it Brandon Powell that got cut? Some random, or was it Lil Jordan Humphrey? Some random dust ball that they've been rolling out got cut. So I'm
Brandon Johnson.
Brandon Johnson, I believe. Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, some household name, So
right.
I think that it might be Humphrey, Lil Jordan Humphrey was who it was. So I think that might be signal that maybe we're going to start to see a little bit more Mims. Dulcich also looks like he's coming off IR. You actually provided some really good Dulcich-related alpha in the offseason vis-a-vis the Troutman insider information as well. So I guess we can save that for the tight end chart, but I'm kind of curious to see how this offense starts to shape up. And if we actually get some potential usable stacking options with Russell Wilson, or if it's just like, yeah, he occasionally produces for fantasy, but it's really hard to pick the right weapon. And sometimes there just isn't a right weapon. A lot of it, just that offense flows through the backs. So it's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I agree for sure. So I think that's probably a good jumping off point to finish up with the quarterbacks. And I'm going to zoom us out here so we can see all the running backs. So here, this is our first running back chart. And honestly, it's my favorite chart that we do. This is, it basically breaks down each of the plays that a running back is on the field for as a percentage of their team's overall. And so you have rush attempts and sort of like a lot of running backs' bread and butter. You have their routes. You have pass blocking. And pass blocking, it's not fantasy helpful, but it is good to know who's trusted to pass block. And then run blocking, which is like, you're on the field, but you're not. There's no chance that you're. This does not translate to anything fantasy wise, but good to see.
Yeah. Go ahead. I was going to say one note for this chart and for the tight end charts coming up. For these, we do like a rolling 4 weeks of data, just because the usage, it's important to be able to see how the trends evolve over the season. Where for like quarterbacks and wide receivers, we really want to get those larger samples to kind of like get rid of some of the noise and the small sample stuff. But for the running backs and tight ends, we do want to be current and staying on top of emerging trends. And so that's, for example, why you see, Saquon Barkley all the way at the top of the chart now. Well, we're missing a bunch of games. We took out
week 1.
Yeah, we're missing week 1. And then Saquon also missed some weeks with injuries. So we've got a really small sample. So we're just looking at a super small sample for Saquon. But for everyone else who's been playing games, we're getting a more recent view on their usage trends. So I think that's a useful feature of this chart.
Yeah. That's a good call out and great explanation. So, I mean, it just strikes me out straight away. The top of this chart is just not what we expected at the start of the year. Like, okay, you have Saquon, then Kyron Williams. We've talked about that. Rachaad White, Joe Mixon, Zach Moss. That's just like a really surprising, what is it, top 5?
Yeah, there's a lot of guys up at the top of the chart where we definitely were not drafting them that way during the off season. One of the ones to me that I think that was really interesting to me is we saw Josh Jacobs get there a little bit this week. Finally, he found his way into the end zone. He got a lot of targets in that game, and so his usage translated a little bit more into fantasy points. He had not, he'd had this elite usage, and we'll see it when we get to the next running back charts with their expected fantasy points. He'd always showed, really good expected fantasy points, but was being really inefficient and not actually converting on them. This week we saw him be able to get there a little bit. It'll improve his expected fantasy points efficiency just from getting the touchdowns. Definitely helps there. But we saw Josh Jacobs, show why, hey, you paid a elevated cost for Jacobs because there's so much work there that in general you've just got such a high floor for most weeks. The other guy that's right in that.
Yeah, he's got like 21 expected points per game. Like
yeah.
He's literally got the double profile where 10 expected rushing points and 11 expected receiving points. So pretty like not doing jack with it a lot of weeks, but like very really strong role. Really strong role.
I was paying particularly close attention to Josh Jacobs in the second half and fourth quarter of that game. Because on that showdown slate, I had a very live lineup, and I needed Josh Jacobs and Musgrave to get me there. And so I see Jacobs racking up all of these just little dink and dunk PPR points. Like, all right, 2 yards, that's whatever. That's 1.2, baby. Let's keep it going. And he just gets all these little worthless targets. Like, but hey, they're worthwhile for fantasy. So good for Jacobs.
Yeah, for sure.
But the other guy,
and then you go ahead.
Oh, we were going to talk about the same guy. I was going to bring up Etienne as well.
I didn't even say Etienne. We just had a meeting of minds.
Yes, I mean, great minds think alike. So, but no, Etienne looks elite. He looks like, at the start of, I want to say at the very, very start of draft season, Etienne was in I want to say he was in the third round, am I remembering this right? He was kind of like in the late 20s ADP wise. And then someone came out and put out a smear campaign on Etienne, and he fell precipitously, into the fourth round. And the market was right away. And dude, it's this stupid name effect. Tank Bigsby, sure, Tank Dell has been productive, but if you get a guy with a 6-sounding name, Sky Moore, Tank Bigsby, market is just going to attribute the cool name price boost on it, and by effect that dragged Etienne down a little bit because everyone was so sure Tank Bigsby was going to be legit. And yeah, Tank Bigsby has been annoying. He he's more so just been a thorn in Etienne's side. He's what's preventing Etienne from being like the RB1. If Etienne got more of those green zone touches that Bigsby has siphoned off, and he ran good and converted them, like you could, there's an outcome where Etienne has 5 more touchdowns this season. And we're talking about, who do you like rest of season, Travis Etienne or Christian McCaffrey? Like that could have happened. So I definitely think Etienne's really exciting going forward. Just like you were saying about Trevor Lawrence, like if we just think about like the best outcomes for this offense, it's really exciting for really all of these pieces. I just think this is an offense that you want to have pieces of. So very, very excited about Etienne going forward.
Yeah, I agree. You said pretty much everything that I was going to say. Took it right out of my mouth. And then interesting as well that Bijan is like right up here, where if you look at the rolling 4 games, he's in the bell cow part of the chart. I know week 1, Tyler Algier, he had a pretty good share, but you take that out, and it looks like it's been all Bijan.
Yeah,
I know we had the carry thing last week where they sort of split at 50-50. But I do prefer to look at the rolling 4 so you don't hone in on single games too much.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bijan, I mean, it's going to sound weird to say that he's a buy low candidate because it feels like every week, even if he has like slightly less fantasy production than you'd want, like he's still putting out some flashy play. Those is it the official Falcons Twitter account that keeps showing these really cool camera angles of Bijan just looking like a baller, man? Oh my gosh, this guy's so fun to watch. But like the little catches the ball behind the back, kind of crossover into the end zone. Whew, he's nice. He's really fun to watch, man. But I mean, if you're dealing with someone who is not watching the games, I would be interested in buying low on Bijan just because I think that with how talented he is, and like this team wants to establish it. They want to do things through the running backs too in the passing game, and just think he's so talented that he's going to force Arthur Smith to give him more work. And I mean, he's already getting it, but I think that if you start getting some good efficiency games from Bijan, and they're playing from ahead and they just get to establish it like they want to, you could have some crazy ceiling games from that guy. So I mean, you can't even really buy him low. He's been fine. I guess it's a buy medium, Right.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that people talk about buy low, but there's also the concept of buying high, where you have an ascending player, and then if you're buying at a price where like he's had a good game, and you're buying off of that good game, people actually sometimes adjust too slowly. So like just for example, Bijan, his resurrection draft at ADP is pick 7, which is like not that different to his preseason. And then you compare that to CMC, who's just clearing away the 101. Like you're sort of buying high on Bijan, but if the trend or like if he like achieves the type of season that he could like just totally like deliver 101 value just like so easily. So I think it sort of is like a buy high, but it's a very good buy high.
Yeah, 100%. And I was just having this conversation with someone that there's a lot of fantasy players out there, and this is more with we're talking about season long and trading dynasty, I guess. Sometimes people are scared to pay that premium price that the truly elite fantasy assets deserve. And so you just need to be willing. I mean, and so much of fantasy football comes down to, hey, there's like 5 dudes. There's like literally 5 total guys who are the true difference makers in this game. And you just need to be willing to pay up for guys like that. And if your opponents are not willing to break the bank for it, and you can outbid them in a trade, or if you're in an auction format, you you're just willing to, hey, my auction rankings say that this guy's only worth $62. Oh gosh, do I want to go six? Dude, it doesn't matter. Just go to 70. Like what were you really going to do with that last $7? Like just get a couple $1 flyers. The difference between your $7 player and your $1 player is like nothing compared to the difference in actually getting a Bijan Robinson versus settling for the running back that's just a Saquon Barkley, right? You're like, I won't take Bijan. I'll settle for Saquon. He'll only be $45. Like, well, congratulations. I really hope that you're enjoying 6th place this season.
Right.
You need the elite guys to win. And so it's just being willing to, when you've identified a guy like that, just go with it. Like you pay all the way up, man.
Yeah, agree for sure. And so somebody who we think is I think is Breece Hall, who's down here at the bottom, and just 40% of his if you well, I guess I'm just looking at week 5. So Breece Hall, we have him here at 40% kind of useful snap if you use rush attempts and routes. And whereas I guess week 5, even though he had the really strong expected points game, 18.5 expected points, he was out only on the field for half the snaps. They used him to block 0 in pass blocks and run blocks. So it kind of seems like every time Breece Hall is on the field, he's getting the ball almost.
100%.
So that one is interesting for me, where I thought the trend was going to be for him to like really rise, but it sounds like it almost like he can live down in the lower part of the chart just from such a high like concentration of usage when he's on the field. But definitely, as we approach playoff time, would 100% expect him to be in the top half of this chart.
Yeah, I think that's a really good assessment. What I would say is Michael Carter is like, no disrespect to Michael Carter, the man, or his family, but he's like the jaggiest jag of all jags. Like, he's a cardboard cutout, just whoever could be doing the job that Michael Carter is doing, except for Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook is too washed to do that job. So I think that Breece has a ton of runway to take more of those snaps, but it's really hard. Like, dude, the guy had 25 carries. Like, it's really hard to want to. I mean, you're running back who's fresh off an ACL injury. Like, do you really want to put more than 25 carries a game on it? I mean, it was abundantly clear. And I feel like Robert Saleh is definitely a sharp enough coach to where he's like, dude, if we're going to win this game, it's on the back of Breece, and we need to put the ball in his belly and let him do his thing. And there's a reason why when they came out, of halftime, the thing that they decided to do was, let's let Breece try and break this game open for us. And he did, like that's their number one A+ play, is give the ball to Breece Hall. So what we did see in the usage was that Michael Carter did get a lot of the passing work. I fully expect Breece Hall to be able to win whatever amount of that the coaches decide that he's able to handle. And I think that, like you said, the later that we get in the season, the more likely he's going to be able to take some of that. I think a big part of why the snap share was where it was he's breaking long runs, and they were feeding him a lot. It wasn't like, oh, he's on the field and like not getting carries. It's like, dude, take the guy off. He ran the ball 5 times on the same drive with him. Like, he's taking a pounding. Like, get the guy some water, But So I think he's got room to rise a little bit. I would anticipate his usage staying on the bottom half of this chart for a while, but you don't really need. He's one of those elite efficiency backs, absolute stud. In my opinion,
so when you
best running back,
right? Oh, and we don't want to like I guess debate like where a player will be on the chart. How I guess my question is how long more do you think how long more do you think before he's getting more targets? Or do you think that's kind of like it could stay like that until like week 15 or something like that?
It's a good question. And I do think that a big part of it comes down to how confident the coaching staff feels the value of those targets actually is. And what I mean by that is they don't really care about the passing game as much right now as the run game, because they're like, passing game shit anyway, dog. Like we don't
Right.
need you running routes out here. Like they're not worth anything. Zach ain't gonna hit you. And so they're like, we're fine having Michael Carter run out here and just like occasionally it'll be an errant ball and occasionally he'll catch it and whatever happens. Like sometimes we got to throw to the backs. So I think that if we do see a quarterback change happen in New York, I feel pretty strongly that would be a spot where you would almost immediately see a change in usage, where it wouldn't be this gradual thing that we're talking about happening over the course of the season. Let's just say I don't think there's a ton of substance to these Kirk Cousins to the Jets rumors, but just let's live in fantasy land here for a second. Let's say Kirk Cousins goes to the Jets at the trade deadline, right? I think that let's just say Breece has been getting that 55%, 60% snap share. I think you immediately see the snap share jump up into like the 70, 75% range. And those additional snaps he's getting are almost exclusively usage in the passing game for him if they get a competent quarterback. So I think it's predicated mostly on the fact that they don't think their passing game is worth very much right now. And so there's no need to deploy their very best player who they're trying to be conscientious of how much volume how much work they put on him. Where they're saying, whatever, someone else can take this low value stuff. We're saving you for the stuff that's important. So,
yeah, makes sense. I think I'd like to see maybe get him some screens or something like that. But yeah, it makes sense. Definitely don't want him there pass blocking when Michael Carter seems to do it fine. I don't see a lot of players here where we haven't really touched on them.
No, I mean, just like trends continuing would be like DeAndre Swift is gonna. Kenny Gainwell is what Kenny Gainwell is, and like we saw it play out last season. We, for whatever reason, didn't learn the lesson. Let some people talk us into the fact that Kenny Gainwell was the Eagles' back to draft because he was going so late. It's like, yeah, if you want a satellite back plus, then you can take him or you can take Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard and Kenny Gainwell are the same shit. Like one of them's in a better offense, but one of them has a way better chance of beating out the back ahead of him for significant work. So it's like, yeah, whatever. But Swift is just he's going to take as much of that share as he's able to carry. They're going to want to give him more because he's doing well with it. The thing that's going to be interesting to watch is if there's ever any, injury or Swift misses any time, and definitely hope that does not happen because he's a super fun running back to watch. It'd be interesting to see, do they just go to Gainwell and he gets a ton of work? Is it Boston Scott? Like, does maybe what we saw earlier from Rashad Penny where he looked so bad, maybe he wasn't fully healthy or something? I don't know, but it'd be interesting to see what would happen in a Swiftless backfield. But I think that trend will continue. One of the other ones it's
so untenable for Gainwell to keep playing this bad and still be so trusted.
Yeah. One of the other ones that I think might continue is Rhamondre Stevenson is working his way down the chart. And I kind of think that might continue as well. The Patriots offense has been really bad lately. And Stevenson has been worse than he was last season as well. So I'm just wondering if they're I don't know what's going on in New England, man. It looks pretty dire. So I think you could easily see Zeke just take these. The touches are almost entirely worthless anyway. So it doesn't really matter. It's probably not worth spending a ton of energy discussing. But yeah, I think Rhamondre is gonna wind up heading down the chart a little bit.
Yeah. Definitely. Feels like it's gone from like maybe 60 plus to probably I mean, last week he was around 50, and that's probably a floor, but it's like you said, when he's playing this poorly, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So yeah, with that, I guess we can point out that Matt Breida in the last couple of games, like let's say since week 3, Matt Breida has had 71% of the team snaps. Since in the last 3 weeks, so he would be higher, and he's definitely the bell cow for the Giants when Saquon is down, but that's translated to just 9 expected points. So it's like 70% of snaps, 9 expected points, and that does feel pretty telling for how bad and poor the Giants' offense has been for fantasy, especially the backs, but all round. That does make me think. It definitely makes me pretty shy about taking stabs on that offense.
Yeah, it's an entirely dysfunctional offense, and I go back to what Ben Gretsch has been saying kind of this whole, like, in the off season and first couple weeks of stealing signals. Like, there's going to be offenses that are functional and not just functional, but so good that the haves and the have-nots that crush, where you just want any bit of that offense you can get your hands on, you want it. There's going to be offenses where you want absolutely nothing to do with them, and the Giants are one of them.
Right. Totally agree. So yeah, let's move on. So this is same chart, but here we've got basically the backups. Anybody stand out to you here?
The Emari Demercado stuff. I know waivers have already passed for most people. I know you got like FFPC waivers tonight, but for Emari Demercado, the thing that I am interested in, he's gotten a ton of steam as, he's the passing down guy, and now that Connor's going to be out, he's the back to own. I always hate when I'm against the market on stuff like this. And to be perfect, like, for full transparency, I emptied the clip on Fab on him in my home league. I told people to do the same, but I kind of think that it's Keontae Ingram, and it feels like too little of a signal to go off of. But the Cardinals released their depth chart and had Keontae Ingram listed as the RB1. He had missed time with a neck injury the last couple of weeks, but he's like at least kind of interesting and like could be kind of good. He wasn't good last season, but I don't think Emari Demercado is very good. He wasn't an exciting prospect or anything. So I'm worried that the Emari Demercado waiver pickup might be fool's gold, and I'm going to end up starting him in a dynasty league this week. But I think that it might end up being you start Demercado, the week plays out, and it's like he got 3 targets for 12 yards and 4 carries for 15 yards, and it was Keontae Ingram that got the James Conner workload. So I'm just a little hesitant there. I mean, if you got a choice between Demercado or Keontae Ingram, the market would definitely tell you it's Demercado right now. But I'm just interested. I'm leaving a light on for Keontae Ingram. I think it's more ambiguous than the market is representing currently. So that was one on this chart that I wanted to talk about. The other one is Spears. Spears is looking.
So it does seem, I guess, just on the Mercado, it does seem like he's definitely the passing down back. Like even when Connor is like around, he it seems like he's the one who's been getting the routes.
That's correct, but it's also been without Keontae Ingram around. And so I'm wondering, so yes, they do seem to like Demercado over Connor in some passing situations, but is that necessarily the case? Like, do they feel the same way with him relative to Keontae Ingram? And I don't know the answer, but I'm just saying I think it's more ambiguous than the market would have us think right now.
Yeah, I think that's actually fair. because I'm looking at the last time. So the last time they're both healthy, or Keontae played a full game. I think Ingram had 5 routes, and Demercado had 3 routes. So yeah, that seems pretty fair. Whereas like we don't actually have a huge sample size of when they're both healthy.
Yeah, and I think like if I have to give the edge to one of them, like I think Ingram's probably a slightly better football player than Demercado, and so I don't know. I think it's close though, and the market wouldn't have you believe that currently with everything I've seen. If you already were on Ingram, then good for you. You're thinking about it critically, but it could be either guy. Is all I wanted to say. I wanted to point out Spears as well on this chart. Just because we saw like flashes of competency with the Tennessee offense, like Hopkins had a good game and looked kind of like vintage Hopkins. So I think that, I mean, let me paint you a picture. It's week 12. The Tennessee Titans are on a 5-game win streak. Mike Vrabel's got the team squarely in the playoff hunt. Ryan Tannehill's looking like vintage Ryan Tannehill. And the offense is humming, and they're delivering usable fantasy weeks for multiple weapons. And Derrick Henry goes down, misses some time. Isn't Tyjae Spears like incredibly valuable? That with what we've seen from him, and like if you look at it through the lens of this offense could get it together, like it's not the wildest thing in the world to think that a Mike Vrabel team kind of gets their shit together over the course of the season, right? Like he's a good coach. He's like very, very boomerific, and that they really want to establish it and all that. Rah, bite their kneecaps, not all the way Dan Campbell bite their kneecaps, but you know what I'm saying. But I think right. That's an interesting situation. So Spears is a great stash, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he's averaging since week 3. He's had 10 expected points per game. So I almost think maybe he's one of those players where you don't know the week to start him. But that seems almost startable to me.
Would you say he's better in basketball?
I was about to, yeah. So, I mean, okay. So week 1, 8.8 expected points. Week 2, 7, 8.8, 8.5, and then 11.8. So like that seems like actually like for a 0 RB team, that seems actually you're happy to start that.
Yeah, if you squarely in the win category for a 0 RB team. If you drafted Spears as a 0 RB part of your RB cohort, that's a big W. It's looking like. And the contingent upside is fantastic, right? That's like, that's the dream. That's what you want. You're getting these little usable weeks to not die at the position. And in the event that things break your way, all of a sudden you've got a super team. So his ADP in the resurrection is 114. So, I mean, that leads me to believe that in definitely in shallower leagues and that he's available, and if you like me have some teams where you're not sure who to start at running back or who to take, like seems pretty crystal clear. Like that's an elite 0 RB option. Here's a fun one: Spears or Roshan Johnson rest of season.
I would say Spears. Just because, I guess Roshan has had the injury in front of him, but then you have to figure out, how's that going to work out with Donta Foreman? And I'll in the 0 RB contingent upside stuff, I always prefer the guy who's already playing good snaps anyway, because like there's no clearer signal that a team likes a guy and trusts a guy than they're already playing him. Like they're taking snaps away from Derrick Henry to play this guy. And like I there's definitely been signs that Derrick Henry is a little bit past the hill. But that to me, they must love this guy. And so if Derrick Henry were to miss time, they're like, okay, like next man up, like they already trust him. So that to me is like, I guess he is small and you have the issues, but I'd be having seen that that outlook for him or that start for him, like I think that's super strong.
That's a good point. I think I thought it was closer when I asked you that question, but you've swayed me. I've come around a little more, and I
like and not to dump on Roshan. I'm just like super excited about Tyjae.
Yeah, that's fair.
Then I guess it's a bit interesting that Devin Singletary is on this chart. That it felt a little bit like at the start of the year that he was going to be a little bit more irrelevant. Feels pretty strong that he's there and sort of like good distribution where he's got rush attempts, he's got routes. So and the offense is sort of humming. Like I don't know if he's I don't think he's exactly startable, but you're that's another one where he's not startable basically, but that's another one where your contingent upside is I just looked at the expected points. He's not startable, but your contingent upside is pretty good there, I think.
Yeah, I'm not as sold on the contingent upside on that one. I mean, shoot, like I don't think even if say Dameon Pierce goes down, like they're not about to like Devin Singletary, bell cow, alpha back. Welcome.
Look, he's going at a pick 210.
Okay. Oh, well, okay. Yeah, at pick 210 for sure. Yeah, go ahead. I'll take him as a last round pick, especially
like
because
that's like clear misprice to me.
Yeah. You're okay with that piece of context, 100%, and especially
like I guess going from Tyjae Spears to Devin Singletary is probably like a little bit of whiplash, but given how like dead and buried he is, and he was on our waiver wire last week for stat chasing, we didn't get him, but like in situations like that where you're trying to pick cigar butts up off the ground, like premium cigar butt right here.
Oh yeah, there's still some life left on that stogie for sure. I would say that the Devin Singletary like contingent upside at pick 210 is definitely way better than the stuff that's available in that range. And again, what we talked about in Resurrection, there's so much less ambiguity. So during the off season, when you're drafting guys that are going like in that undrafted range, there's some real gems there. You know, there's Kyron, there's Puka, there's Tutu, there's Justice Hill, there's some awesome stuff. But now like cat's out of the bag on most of those guys. So the ambiguous stuff is just for the most part dead and gone. And so to get Devin Singletary there where it's like people just buried him because he's not super exciting, but like that's a guy might get you 7 points in a week that you need it, you know? So that's worth it at that point in the draft. Where normally in best ball, like with that last round pick, fuck your 7 points. Like give me someone who has some crazy upside, you know, but like in Resurrection, it's a slightly different version of the game. Yeah. But
I mean, he had 6.5 points in week 3. Ooh. So like that's not even contingent value. So like in some rougher zero RB rooms, I guess you still get some starts, but if Dameon Pierce were to go down, like I definitely think 10 to 15 is like weekly is pretty viable there.
Yeah, you got me on the 10, maybe not on the 15.
Listen, I won a tournament on 15 points from Devin Singletary.
Fair. All right, let's move to the tight end chart here. I lied.
We still have expected points. So I mean, I think probably best to talk about maybe some of the efficiency.
Yeah.
Given that we've talked so much about usage.
Yeah. When I was first looking at this chart, there were a couple. We already talked about Swift. We talked about Pacheco last week. But the stuff I was noticing was guys in that 5 to 10 fantasy point range, which, I mean, speak of the devil, there's Devin Singletary. I saw a lot of guys, though, in that range, both on this one and the next chart that we'll look at, where I was like, these are all kind of interesting. Like, there's a lot of guys here where I'm like, we talked about Tyjae Spears as well. It's so funny. Like, all the guys that we just spent a bunch of time talking about, they're all right there in this range. And that's why I had kind of identified this as a lucrative spot of the chart to drill down on. Jalen Warren, Tyjae Spears, I think P. Ryan, really you're just looking at Broncos backfield member. Ideally, there's not 3 of them active is what you're looking at there with either Jaleel or P. Ryan. But, Justice Hill being in there too. We did see Justice Hill again when he's healthy, because in that first week back, he only got 11 snaps. But when he's healthy, he's the one that's getting the high value touches for the running backs, which is the thesis all along on Justice Hill. And so I definitely think that you can see this group of guys here in this 5 to 10 range. I see the potential for upward trajectory for a lot of them. And we talked about a lot of them. Charbonnet as well, we didn't cover on because he had a bye, but Charbonnet I think is also interesting because we've seen his snap share and his routes increase week over week, and Kenneth Walker's routes and involvement in the passing game decreased a little bit, and Charbonnet has looked like the kind of back that gets Pete Carroll all hot and bothered too. He's just willing to run his face into another man's face. So but that range, that was when I put this chart together, I was like, man, this 5 to 10 point range is actually what we need to focus on and talk about this week, because there's some really interesting players here.
Yeah, agree. I guess we've sort of like hit on them all or most of them. I don't know if there's anyone we haven't talked about. Like, I mean, we've buried Najee Harris. Like, honestly, it's sort of shocking to see him in the 5 to 10 expected points range. Like,
he's done a little better, for like, and I don't hear what I'm not saying. Like, I'm still not going to be drafting very much Najee Harris. I mean, I know the market has started to come around on like a more efficient price for him, but he's been better with respect to like what Najee has been. He's been the better version of Najee lately, where he's had a couple breakaway runs, and I mean, he's the most frustrating thing about. I'm going to put myself in the headspace of a Najee fantasy owner right now, and I'm watching Najee Harris, who I was so excited to draft. He's disappointed me all season, and he breaks a long run, and he's breaking away from the defense. And just when I'm thinking he's going to pull away and score a touchdown, there's defensive linemen gaining on him, and he is getting caught from behind by like the ref, who looks like he needs a walker to be out there on the field, is like also gaining on Najee. Like, the dude is never take this to the bank. Najee Harris will not have a breakaway touchdown of more than 50 yards for the rest of his career. There's no shot that, like, you would need an earthquake to put every defender on the ground for him to do that. Like, this guy just cannot. I mean, he's having some of these breakaway runs, but his top end speed is just not there. So that's got to be frustrating if you're a Najee manager and you're watching him break away and you're like, well, I'm never getting a touchdown out of this, but I got my 2 points for the 20 yards that he got me, so that's cool.
Yeah, pretty rough. So you're sort of down bad for getting efficiency, and then also you're not getting all the work or even close to it. You're getting 5 to 10 expected points.
All right, that was our contractually obligated shit on Najee segment for the week.
Yeah. So let's move on.
So call back to last chart, but we could stay on this one because it's 2 players from the different charts. But you'll notice Sanders on the last chart was starting to move in the wrong direction, and Chuba is looking like he could be moving more in a desirable direction. Now, there's that Sanders is dealing with an injury, so we can't be 100% certain that it's, the team feels that Chuba's the better option. Chuba, shout out to Ben Gretsch for this little nugget. Chuba has been taking a higher percentage of the high value touches away from Sanders. Sanders is getting more snaps, but Chuba is representing a larger amount of the high value touches in the offense, which is not great. If you're a Miles Sanders manager, you'd really prefer for him to have at least a proportionate amount of the high value touches. So I do think that's interesting for Chuba. And again, like the theme holds for this week, guys in that 5 to 10 fantasy point range. I think the reason that these are interesting is because like for a lot of the higher end guys, we've talked about them ad nauseum at this point. And like a lot of those trends are holding or like at least continuing. And so it's kind of same old, but some of these guys in the 5 to 10 range look like things could change for them. And so that's why they're the most interesting. I think another one that shows up on this chart in that area is Cam Akers. Oh man, I don't know exactly how to feel about it. So see where Mattison is on the chart. He's right on that, barely in the 15 to 20 expected fantasy point threshold. I think a lot of that is like kind of the earlier weeks holding him there from when he had even higher usage. How do you think this Akers and Mattison stuff shakes out? Where do both of them end respectively on this chart? Let's say 6 weeks from now. Where do those guys end up?
So it does seem like it's sort of trending to where it's like a hot hand situation, and like they're both sort of like 50-50. So I guess if we're looking at Mattison being at a 15, let's say just round numbers, there's 20 total in the backfield expected points, then I guess for me, and maybe this is a cop out, I'm just gonna split it roughly in two and say they're both end up around 10. And I guess that's been pretty much what's been true the last 2 weeks. So week 4, Mattison had 11.4. Week 5, he had 9.9. So that I feels like maybe pretty fair. Last 2 weeks, Akers has been 5.9, 4.7. So yeah, I mean maybe definitely on maybe the higher end of somewhere between 8 and 10 each is where I'd put them.
It's funny.
Trending towards.
When I had looked at the data and thought like this is something I want to ask, I legitimately wanted to get your opinion on it because that was the exact same conclusion I came to. I was like, maybe I'm just like middling it too much. I'm like, they'll just both be 10, whatever. But I'm glad you felt the same way because that makes me feel a little more validated in my opinion. I was like, maybe I'm just like anti-Mattison pilled and he should be higher. But no, I agree with you. They probably both end up right around that 10 fantasy point range. And but I think what you mentioned about the hot hand thing is what makes this the most interesting to me. And it's that it's not that every week they will each be 10. It's that
right
on average they will be 10, but you will get usable weeks from both of them. And I especially think that in the games where the Vikings are playing weaker competition, where especially teams that are weaker against the run, where now they have less incentive to throw because the best wide receiver in football is on IR for a couple weeks, you might end up getting a little bit more out of these guys. And that's really interesting. And what's especially interesting is one of my best ball teams that I was just so pissed at myself for drafting Cam Akers on also had a really early share of Alexander Mattison at like pick 120 or something stupid like that. So now I've got the fun Mattison Akers ping pong weeks. I'm sure you all care tremendously about this. I will keep you posted on how it goes this season. I'm sure that's going to be what advances me to the finals, the Akers Mattison ping pong in week 16.
That's a tournament winning combination right there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I was thrilled.
I'd have thought and maybe I'm way off here. I almost wondered though if them not having Mattison actually stops them being able to run because their offense is less efficient. So they're in less positive down and distance situations. They're less likely to have the lead. Like I almost wonder if like Jefferson being gone is a negative.
100% agree with you. That's why I qualified it with, I think it's when they're playing weaker teams, weaker competition, especially those that are weak against the run. But in general, I agree with you. It's bad news for both of these backs. I think that, on average, it's going to get worse for these guys before it gets better. And it's really just going to come down to how the season shakes out for the Vikings. I think that people that are talking about like, the Vikings might blow it all up. They might trade away Kirk Cousins. Like, I think it's a little overblown. Number one, because that division is just trash. This is a little bit of a segue, but are the Lions actually good? Like I feel like everyone's like on this.
I hate to do this. Should we talk about some of the situations where a guy's gotten injured and there's kind of like Phillips, or there's people wondering about like, hey, who what should I do? Like, for example, what's the best way? What do you think is the best way to play the Miami backfield right now?
Have a piece of it. Literally pick a card, any card. I'm if you're doing it off waivers, it's Jeff Wilson in my opinion. But like if you can't get Jeff Wilson, just grab the next one. Like
right.
It's the
it's you want a shot, right?
Yeah, look at the efficiency. Look at the size of those bubbles, man. Like I want whoever is getting right. If Mike McDaniel himself is lining up in the backfield taking carries, like I'll take a shot on Mike McDaniel. Like just I want a piece of the backfield. So the correct answer is play it. Have a piece of it.
Right.
And then if you have a team, like for example, in season long, if you're trying to figure out how to play it. I mean, if there's anyone that's got a chan in your league and they're desperate, they need the production now, like that's the kind of guy where I'm trying to go get it and just hold it on my roster if I'm in a good position to make the playoffs. Like that seems extremely lucrative. But no, in general, Jeff Wilson would be my preference there. I mean, most assuming you're not going to be able to get Mostert, he's already rostered and no one's going to trade him now with the chan out. So
Mostert is already a fourth round pick in Resurrection. So definitely I think that's probably pretty out of reach. But you definitely want to be prioritizing getting a piece of it. And like you said, even if Jeff Wilson isn't there, you want to put yourself in a position where you could just look into a significant share or a reasonable share of the Miami backfield. And then the other one that I was thinking about is, and we touched on this a little bit, but how do you think is the best way to play the Bears backfield now that I guess Herbert he had the injury, and then I've seen some kind of news where like he could come back, but he's going to struggle to get to 100% for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mentioned in a previous show when we talked about high ankle sprains and kind of the mechanics of the injury and what it means for a running back or a player's fantasy production. Like, dude, a high ankle sprain is just a shitty injury. Like I wish that was not a possible thing to happen to a human, because that just sucks, man. Like I'm very sad for Khalil Herbert. I think he's a really good player, and I was excited to see like maybe if the Bears could get it together and he had some positive game scripts to do some work in. Like that's the kind of guy where you know what we all want, like Jalen Warren. We all talked about Jalen Warren all offseason. It's like, oh, he could be like a Tony Pollard kind of back. Like, while Khalil Herbert's not terribly involved in the passing game, and to be fair, Tony Pollard hasn't been as involved in the passing game this season either. He's like explosive and efficient like Tony Pollard is. So like I could have totally seen Herbert being a diet Tony Pollard. But to talk about guys that we actually can play going forward, because I think for Herbert, you're basically, the way I'm treating Herbert in like a season long format is I need to see it first before I'm gonna, if you got a better option, I need to see it from Herbert first before I'm gonna go back to the well on him. I would prefer to have Roshan. I believe that Roshan's going to be the guy where through the course of the season, the team seems to like Roshan a lot. I mean, number one, he's been active. Deonta Foreman's been healthy and active. And I know a big part of that was that Deonta Foreman doesn't play special teams. I think Deonta's a fine back. He's like a totally replacement level back that can go in and do the work. And he's a big guy. He can carry a load. So I bet you, especially if, say, Roshan misses this week because he's not all the way back from the concussion, I mean, shoot, you could get a very good week out of Deonta Foreman this week. And you probably can get some solid usable weeks from him going forward. But the guy I want to bet on is the guy with the wider range of outcomes in Roshan, and the guy that seems like a much more competent piece in the passing game, where early in the season we did see flashes that they were not only willing to use him in the passing game, but they gave him a lot of targets in that. I mean, it was a lot of garbage time stuff, but I think it was enough for me to feel like, yeah, Roshan could get used a lot in the passing game and get those high value touches. And he's also got the profile to be like a between the tackles, like carry the load, full 3-down kind of workhorse guy. So that's what I want. But I think both are good ways to play it, but I would have a lean towards Roshan.
Yeah. Your argument made me feel like, okay, like, so I know like the fantasy, a lot of the commentary that I've seen is like, like you just want to take shots on either. But the fact, it is interesting that Roshan was already active, which is sort of like a decent sign that they like him more than Deonta Foreman. That does make me think, okay, there should be a separation in our expectations for the two. Like our going in expectation should be for them to favor Roshan. Whereas like not kind of default to like, oh, it's just going to be 50-50. Deonta Foreman, he always comes in and does a great job. Like it does feel a little bit like you have pathways to Roshan just winning over a big role, and that's something to be quite excited about.
Yeah, I mean, and especially with even like fast forward to when Khalil Herbert's fully healthy and back in action, like there's a good chance that Roshan could have done enough. If he's good and he's playing well, like it could be a thing where, well, hey, now it's Roshan and Khalil Herbert are just going to split the work 1A, 1B, and Roshan gets all the passing stuff because we know that they don't like Khalil Herbert in the passing game. And I think he himself has said like, oh yeah, I need to get better at that. Like that's not my strong suit. So yeah, I definitely prefer Roshan there. Were there any other injury scenarios that we needed to go over?
No, I feel like we covered the Cardinals pretty well. We went over that. We kind of gave the stats, so happy with that. And I think we're ready to move on to tight ends.
Okay, let's hit the tight ends here.
Oh, getting away with myself. So this is a tight end utilization and efficiency chart where essentially we're looking at what percentage of team dropbacks that they're running a route, and then just because it is useful to see how often are they on the field for these routes. We have pass blocking in here too, and so you can kind of see Dallas Goedert by far the highest, or maybe no, that's not the right way to put it. He is at the highest, and so that's kind of like he's on the field. He's running a route for the most amount of passes, and then we don't want to focus just solely on if you're running a route. We want you to get targeted too, because like for example, Mark Andrews, his routes look a lot different to Tyler Higbee, because he's getting targeted 21% of his routes, whereas Tyler Higbee is just 13%. And then just because we prefer down the field targets, we've also got ADOT. For example, George Kittle targeted 8.4 yards down the field on average is a lot better than K. Otton's 4.1. Anybody here stick out as surprising to you, or sort of like priority targets?
Well, we've got a new member of the class this week.
Oh, I should also say this one is also throws out week 1. That's a rolling 4 week.
Yep, just like the running back one, because usage is very important here. But we've got a new addition to this chart, and it's my boy Jake Ferguson with his 25% targets per route run, little piddly 4.9 ADOT. But man, if you're watching the Cowboys games, they sure do like involving him. I mean, there wasn't much to take away from the 49ers game other than the Cowboys got absolutely curb stomped, but he definitely looks viable. I mean, shoot, like there's really not very many other tight ends with targets per route run that high that you can get. I do think you're going to see his snaps go up a little bit. He is not going to climb this chart though to get to be, he's never going to be like the getting 80% of snaps or 90% of snaps kind of guy. They are already showing us that they want to involve their rookie second round tight end, who for whatever reason, like are Dutch last names just impossible for announcers to pronounce? Like it's Luke Schoonmaker. Like it's not Schoonmaker. Can we stop calling the dude Schoonmaker? Jesus. But anyway, yeah, I think
just on your Ferguson point, if we look just at the last 2 weeks, for example, he's been on the field for 76% or 75% of dropbacks with a route running 70%.
Yeah, and that's more in line with what I'm expecting for him for kind of to hold going forward. I think that you will see more usage from Schoonmaker, but Ferguson's going to be that number one guy. I do think he's going to be able to keep up his targets per route run it's not an aberration. Like this has been happening long enough. Like he's that little safety blanket, that's what they're using him as. And so in full PPR, he's fantastic. Fringe tight end 1. Really what you're excited for is the Cowboys haven't scored a ton of offensive touchdowns, and they do really like to involve their tight ends at the goal line. And I definitely am interested in when they get some more favorable game scripts and situations. I think that offense in general is going to they will be forced to perform better out of necessity because their defense just got decimated by injury. Like at the end of the 49ers game, they literally didn't have a fourth corner to go out onto the field. They had 3 corners that were healthy and able to go. So like, I think that they're hurting in the secondary now, and they're probably going to get scored on, and that defense is going to look less threatening than it did early. So I think that's bullish for Jake Ferguson because the offense will actually have to finally score some points, but it remains to be seen if they can.
Yeah, makes sense. And looks interesting to me that Zach Ertz has stayed up here. Some of the players that have been surprising, like Logan Thomas is even though his points and overall targets have seemed to have been good, is falling down a bit in terms of the routes. Trying to figure out a lot of
part of the Logan Thomas falling is we've got one game less where he ran all the routes, and we've got one game in there where he got his head damn near taken off and left the game.
That's true. So just since week 4, he's been at 78%. So yeah, you're right. I do like him as I think between him and Jake Ferguson, you're getting guys they're getting there in slightly different ways. But I think they're both interesting and kind of in the same tier of tight end. I would assume, Logan Thomas has a higher ADOT, but he's getting lower targets per route run. I would assume they probably are similar price. Do you know what their resurrection price is? This is Logan Thomas and Zach Ertz. So
Oh,
Logan.
Sorry, I was saying Logan Thomas and Jake Ferguson. I mean Zach Ertz.
So Logan Thomas 139, and Ferguson I looked is 104. Yeah, 104.
So really good buying opportunity for Logan Thomas. Then, in my opinion, that one stands out to me.
Makes sense for sure. Where you're getting him at the end of the 12th round, so definitely getting a sort of a decent tight end there in the 12th round, which is tough to do, especially when we've had so many cards flipped over at this stage of the game. So definitely probably a pretty strong streaming target or like pickup if you haven't gotten an elite tight end or if you get an injury or something like that and you see him on the waiver wire, definitely a priority target there. The other one I see here that's a little bit interesting is Irv Smith, who is right he's right around he's right around like what, just under 80%. So that I think that is a little bit interesting. The target's not there. The ADOT isn't great, but a little bit interesting.
It's concerning that the targets aren't there because there is nobody on that offense outside of Jamar Chase. So like if he had any target earning capability, he would be getting targets already. So for me, and I want Irv Smith to happen. I was super excited about Irv Smith early in his career when he was on the Vikings. Like I was all about Irv, but I think this is pretty good signal that Irv Smith is not happening. Like he can't. Tyler Boyd doesn't look great. Like he's getting, who we've got Trent Taylor out there. Like he's not earning targets over those guys. Like it doesn't seem terribly promising. And also in an offense that's still outside of the Jamar Chase going absolutely nuclear against the Cardinals. Like I'm not totally convinced that the Bengals are back, So Irv Smith for me personally less interesting, but I do need to get I need to get your alpha on the Adam Troutman, Greg Dulcich situation. I alluded to this earlier. For those of you that are with us that did not follow Dricko's insider intel this offseason, he gave us the information that Adam Troutman was, in fact, the Broncos' starting tight end months before the season. He let us know that Dulcich was not, in fact, the guy. He saved me lots of money that would have gone.
I saved so much money myself from that. I was so excited about Dulcich. And, know somebody who knows somebody, and they were like, yeah, Adam Troutman's the starter. And, oh, okay. So I feel it sounds like you're going to ask me, so Dulcich coming back, what's the outlook here? And I think his outlook is really just going to be like sort of like a occasional tight end too. So he'll probably get more snaps than most tight end twos, but you're probably looking at 50% route share, maybe 60%-ish on a good week, and more harms the slot receiver role for the Broncos than anything else. And that's sort of like what I'm expecting. So how do you use that? I'm not sure. It makes me a little bit concerned for Marvin Mims that they're putting these dust balls on the field ahead of him, and now they have somebody who they actually like playing, and that kind of hurts his ability to get on the field more. But I don't know if that's that useful for fantasy.
I do think it's useful. It's useful in the fact that we know that it's really we talked about this earlier with respect to Russ. It's hard, just like how Pat Mahomes is really kind of hard to play in DFS because it's like, well, I basically have to play Mahomes with Kelsey. I can't use any of the wide receivers because it's just too like I'm just drawing too thin to actually pick the right one in a given week. And like I got a limited number of entries. You know, if I was allowed to have 10,000 entries, sure, there would be an optimal frequency to roll out Mahomes with random wide receivers, you know, but I think you're going to see that with Wilson this season too, unless you get a significant shift in how the Broncos are operating their offense right now. You're not going to be able to kind of dial in who in that passing game is the guy that you want. And so how I would play it in best ball going forward for Resurrection is, unless I'm getting a significant discount on Broncos passing game options, I'm really not taking them. I'm pretty much only taking them when I'm stacking them with Russell Wilson. I think when you have an offense like this, where it's just so hard to pin down who's going to be the guy scoring you points regularly, you really just only want to be doing that when it's correlated. So I think that's how you apply that the Adam Troutman inside info
right.
that you're able to give us.
So maybe he's like not Troutman. Maybe Troutman and Dulcich, when they're stone minimum. Maybe they are viable plays as stacks, but you really want to put it, especially as you're thinking about something like DFS. you probably do want to play some pretty strong / chalky plays around them.
Yeah, that's a great call. Just with the QB tight end correlation being so strong and so much based on touchdown scoring, that's probably. I'm also mad at you for that, because now I know there's going to be a week where I light some money on fire playing Russell Wilson with a stupid tight end stack, and I'm going to be looking at my phone at like 1:00 on a Sunday afternoon. Like, well, there goes all those lineups, all those Russell Wilson tight end stack lineups. Damn it, Drico.
The info, the alpha, I give it and I take it away.
Yeah, it saved my best ball bags, but I'm going to light some DFS money on fire. I already know.
So let's move on to the backup section of the chart.
There's two. There's literally two here. I'm gonna save us some time. There's two guys worth talking about here. Okay. One of them is Michael Mayer. Mayer, because he started to get some usage, and it was like downfield targets, and holy cow, surprise, the guy who is heralded as like the best tight end in the class looks really good at playing tight end. Like, who could have guessed? He looks good, man. So
49% route share last week, 18% targets per route run, and then 2.3 yards per route run. So like that's more than signs of life. That's like, oh, they involved him, and like you said, he's good. Like this is about as positive a week you could have gotten given the first couple.
The way I want to apply this information going forward is I still think it might take a while for us to get there with Mayer. In best ball, though, in Resurrection prior to this week, I would not have drafted Michael Mayer, right? I was getting enough signal from the Raiders. I was like, dude, this guy's not ever going to be usable this season. Maybe 1 week, but now this was enough signs of life where I'm like, okay, I could see this being kind of a slow burn over the course of the season, where he's earning more and more playing time in an offense where it's really concentrated. And so if he works his way into that offense where it's, hey, we pass to 3 guys and 3 guys only. It's Devontae Adams, Jakobi Meyers, and Michael Mayer. And those are the guys that receive passes. Then I'm all of a sudden very interested. So he's back to life for me in a resurrection draft. In the weird instances where the Raiders make the playoffs, I could maybe I'm literally never taking him as like a late round playoff best ball dart throw, because I'm literally only doing that if I think the Raiders are doing the Super Bowl, But anyway, though, Michael Mayer back to life, definitely worth talking about. The other one is Noah Gray, just because of the Travis Kelce injury. Kelce came back into the game am sure he got all of the best painkillers to be able to do that, because that ankle sprain, dude, it looked like that shit hurt. The way he went down, and like everyone who's ever
Just
sprained their
fell
ankle bad,
immediately.
dude, everyone who's sprained their ankle bad before knows, like, oh my gosh, that one sucked. Like, you know, I mean, with how frustrated he was on the sideline, like, yeah, that one hurt. And you hear guys talk about, like, oh yeah, with the adrenaline and the painkillers, like, you're able to come back 1 week, but a lot of the times the next week, like, it's a lot harder to go. So it's a short week. We'll find out tomorrow. It sounds like he's trending towards playing. He's practicing. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more Noah Gray. And I would just kind of keep an eye on Noah Gray in the event that, you know, Kelsey re-aggravates the ankle or something. Noah Gray becomes very interesting. So those were the two on my radar. Was there anyone else that you wanted to talk about, or anything to add on Noah Gray?
The only I guess worry that I would have is that when Kelsey was out week 1, it did seem like, so I remember watching the week 1 game in Vegas, and every time a white tight end for the Chiefs caught the ball, I just assumed that it was Noah Gray. And then I looked at the box score, and there was the other guy. It was like almost like split, even though Noah Gray was running the routes. The other guy was like getting almost half the targets. I'm drawing a blank on that other guy's name. Blake Bell.
Blake Bell
seemed to be getting a decent amount. So I guess my concern would be that even if Kelsey goes down, that maybe it's harder for Gray to sort of like consolidate the targets even with Kelsey down. But again, it's tight end, so it's not like you need Kelsey usage to pay off. Like, could still be very interesting.
Yeah. Was worth mentioning with the Kelsey injury, but that is a good point. It's not a guaranteed sure thing that Noah Gray is going to be, you know, he's certainly not going to be Travis Kelce, but he could be someone usable. But
yeah, for sure. So yeah, let's like you alluded to, let's move on to the wide receiver section, and looks like we have we have pretty clearly like the halves part of the chart, and then like a big cluster in the middle, and we have the what you call it, the cardio route runners. So, and I guess I'll explain this chart again. So we've got weighted targets per route run, and this is sort of like just targets per route run, but weighted towards down the field throws. And so guys who get a high percentage of targets and down the field are on the right side. And then guys who either don't get targeted enough or their targets are too close to the line of scrimmage, down to the left. And then just because we do want fantasy points, we have that on the vertical axis. And then the color of the dot also corresponds to their route share.
When I put this chart together, there's a couple things that I look at. It's, you know, first thing, usually there's not a ton of guys in this top left quadrant, but these are the regression candidates, right? Guys scoring a lot of fantasy points on, you know, low weighted targets per route run. And so here we've got Adam Thielen and Gabe Davis living here. Gabe Davis makes a ton of sense. We saw, you know, he's just getting there on, he gets a couple deep targets every once in a while, or like an end zone target here and there. And this week it was funny. He got a pass interference call, or not a pass. He got an offensive penalty that called back a touchdown. And then on the very next play, he got the touchdown anyway. But I would expect, you know, if this is a good week for Gabe Davis, I would expect him to probably come in with a little bit lower fantasy points per game. Adam Thielen, I think, is like such a clear sell high candidate. Number one, because there's just no chance that this guy is going to keep scoring touchdowns. You know, like, he's just getting these garbage time touchdowns, and like all just an insane amount of targets. Right now we're seeing like the right tail outcomes for Adam Thielen. And when you get an actual like mean outcome for Adam Thielen, which is like, what do you think? 7 targets for 5 receptions and 58 yards, no touchdown. Like, you're not pleased, And so if you can trick anyone into buying your Adam Thielen lemons, you should be offloading them. But that was in the regression category. Any guys to add in that category for you?
So who else is there? I think at this stage, that's probably the strongest sort of like regression shout, I think. It is, I mean, it is interesting seeing Adam Thielen play well. Like, he's obviously not he's not getting targets that are like really down the field. But his yards per reception are not awful. They're like he's getting around 10 yards per reception despite his ADOT being around, let's say, 7. So it's like it's a bit interesting that he's playing good Adam Thielen football. And then I do remember when he was younger, it felt like every week he can't score this many touchdowns every week. And then Adam Thielen scores another touchdown. And so, I mean, there's part of me that's sort of like, especially at the price that you were getting before, that maybe was too quick to bury him. Like that maybe he clearly does have some life left in him, where he's like somewhat a viable best ball player. But at the same time, like you said, you're clearly getting the best Adam Thielen games he can. And like as an older player, like the weeks 1 through 5, those are almost always going to be the best weeks for a player like that. Like the chances that you get this kind of play from him down the playoff stretch, really thin.
And that was always my point with Adam Thielen. I have very little to no Adam Thielen. I might have a full fade on him in BBM and the traditional format season-long type tournaments, because I don't care about your week 1 through 4 points.
He's going in the 6th round.
Yeah, I'm fully out. But you know where I did draft Adam Thielen? I drafted him in some weekly winners teams because I was like, you know what? I've got a team that's really well constructed for week 6. Let's throw a little Adam Thielen on there. Got a team where I've got a bunch of bringbacks for week 3. Let's throw an Adam Thielen share in there. Why not? Because then I can't. Your production does matter. That is all the money is in this week now. So I can use Adam Thielen. So that's kind of my stance on it. And if Adam Thielen does this the whole season and it's the fantasy playoffs and I just get buried by having no Adam Thielen, mea culpa. Hey, that one's on me.
Right.
Like, I shouldn't have written him off. But I'm not feeling as scared as if you had told me, hey, by, week 5, Adam Thielen is going to have, multiple 30-point games, I would feel like I'd probably be pretty scared of that. But honestly, I'm not. I just feel like it's not that sustainable. The other guy to transition into another one who's like borderline regression candidate is just DJ Moore. And it's not to say that DJ Moore is going to be bad, but it's to say that the amount of fantasy points per game DJ Moore has been scoring is a lot relative to his weighted targets per route run. I would expect him to be more, what makes a ton of sense to me is like DJ Moore as like a Deebo Samuel-ish kind of player, in that he's doing so much, yards after catch. And DJ Moore, I think, is a better wide receiver than Deebo, but they're both awesome football players. Both of those guys are just absolute beasts, like can really make their hay after the catch. And so I think they're kind of a similar-ish archetype. I do think DJ Moore's probably got the slight edge in receiving, but maybe Dio offsets that with his work that he gets in the running game. And so I would expect those players to come in a little closer to each other on the chart. So that's a regression candidate. Again, not saying DJ Moore is going to be bad, but just saying like that's a guy that's kind of looking like a potential outlier. The other guy that I think they're in a similar weighted targets per route run category, but it looks like a guy that could be ascending is Zay Flowers. We saw there's a couple reasons I feel like Zay Flowers is really interesting. Number one, all of the other Ravens, I mean, Zay Flowers included, all of the Ravens pass catchers decided that they totally forgot how to catch a football. And so it's like the opportunity is there for the taking. It's whoever emerges as like a reliable weapon could really consolidate some stuff there. And Zay finally saw some deeper targets. He actually got some decent air yards on was it a 11 target day, a 13? He got a substantial number of targets this week. Pretty interested in Zay Flowers. Could see him. He looks like the classic rookie profile where his production is going to increase as the season goes on. Really, really excited about Zay Flowers. He looks like he could be a big hit.
Yeah, Zay Flowers, definitely agree there. And I think what might help him a bit too is all the drops that you had from the other receivers. Whereas maybe if he's able to sort of like continue to play well and like become a trusted receiver, like you definitely have strong paths here where it's like as he develops and he emerges that like okay that we have to run our passing offense through Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers. Like we just have to do it. I think that makes a lot of sense. Do you? I guess my question there is: Are you leaving Bateman for dead?
I don't want to. I think he's a good player. That drop was so egregious, and it really kind of seems like the Ravens don't think he's a good player.
Right.
I don't know, man. I gotta say, there's still a little bit. There's probably bag defending, but there's a little bit in my brain where I'm just like, he had like no time with this offense in the off season. It's a new system, like, and really like Bateman hasn't played a ton of actual NFL games. You know, he's been injured so much. So there's a little bit of me that's trying to like rationalize it or justify it as like, maybe we get that kind of typical rookie production, you know, change over the course of the season that you see with rookies where their production is going to increase as the season goes on. Maybe we see that with Bateman. That's really my only hope for Bateman. But man, it looks pretty bleak. I guess the other best thing you could say for him is just like we talked about, tons of drops. No one's really like established themselves as the dominant option. Although Zay Flowers looks like he's already got, you know, he's got a head start on the other receiving options there. If you had to, if I had to put money on it, I'd say it ends up being a pretty concentrated passing tree where it's Andrews, Flowers, and then whatever Aguilar, Bateman, OBJ like mix in for every week is purely unusable in fantasy. It's only there to annoy you as a Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews owner. So
yeah, makes sense for sure. And I think that is a tough one to talk about as well. Just because it's clearly an offense where like when things click, like there's going to be fireworks for sure. Just because it's got Lamar Jackson and they're trying to pass more, but when you haven't had the points from really any one option, it's super hard to like be like confident. But definitely agree, far and away, the Zay Flowers is like sort of like easily the best bet to to be the sort of like emergence. And so he's picked 61 in a resurrection. I feel like there's a lot of ways for you to get paid off. Like, and when I say paid off, not just like perform ADP, like there's a lot of ways for that to be, for Zay Flowers to be like just a total complete slam dunk smash at that pick.
Yeah, 6. I was hoping you would say later because I want to be able to just like, be like, okay, cool. It's 100% Zay Flowers. That's the way to play it. So, I mean, pick 61 is still a good price. Like you probably get a lot of wins in there. But I was hoping you were going to say something like 70. But I mean, dude, what's the difference between 61 and 70? Like I'm just it's the value hound in me. I had a couple guys that I want to like rapid fire here where it wasn't like a huge change, but more just like confirming a trend or so. So Puka with Cooper Kupp back, we got enough information that Puka is going to be still heavily involved in the offense. For people that got Puka on waivers, for people that drafted Puka, looking like an enormous win. It's just like that's the Robert Woods role in this offense, and it's going to be here to stay. So. Great news for Puka. I know that there were some people that were thinking that this week you might start to see him lose a lot of work with Kupp back, but it just looks like it's the clear 1 and 2, and then 2-2 we'll talk about later. He shows up on the later charts, but so Puka was one I wanted to hit on. The other one, Jakobi Meyers. We talked about it briefly. The Raiders' offense so concentrated. Jakobi looks like a smash where he was going all summer in best ball. Fantastic pick. This reminds me of the when you had the Vikings with Steph Diggs and Adam Thielen, where it's like there are 2 players that catch passes on this NFL football team, and these are them. Like that's it here for the Raiders. It's Devontae Adams, it's Jakobi Meyers, and man, that's super appealing. You love when an offense gets that concentrated. It just gets so easy to play it that way. So that would be one where I bet you Jimmy G's probably. I mean, Jimmy G doesn't look great, but for best ball, just with the prices of quarterbacks, and I mean, I don't know about you. When I'm looking at a lot of my best ball teams, some of my best teams are the full punt QB teams where I've just got certified studs everywhere but QB. And I'm getting 17 to 20 points from Jimmy G, and Sam Howell gives me a spike week here and there. So I'm assuming Jimmy G still goes really late in resurrection.
And let me tell you, I do think it's interesting where, so Jimmy G goes a pick 192.
Oh yeah, baby, load it up. If you're drafting resurrection, I'm assuming where's Jakobi at now? Got to be in the 50s.
So he's still at 81.
Oh my God! If you're drafting resurrection and you don't have 100% Jakobi Meyers and Jimmy G, you're playing the game wrong. Like normally, I'm not gonna be 100% of a guy thing, but like the market is not doing that correctly. It's so concentrated. It's so good for best ball when you get something like this. Like literally,
and Devontae Adams is still pick 13. So
if you're listening to this right now, fire up as many resurrection drafts as you can, queue up the Raiders players, and just make sure you don't auto draft them too early, and just load it up, baby. Like pack the bags, fill them all the way to the brim. That's going to make me draft resurrection teams. Literally when we finish the show, I'm going to get in bed and fire up like 20 resurrection drafts and just multi-table it and do 20 Raiders stacks.
So normally when we're saying goodbye after the show, you tell me I'm gonna make some dinner, so you're gonna be eating up some Raider stacks.
Yeah, we're literally skipping dinner to draft Raiders.
Probably not too interested in Josh. Are you interested in Josh Jacobs at pick 25? I know we covered it runway.
It's one where knowing the price of the rest of the offense, I want that in my team stack. I think running backs in team stacks are very valuable. And so the way that I will play it is the majority of my Raiders stacks wouldn't have Josh Jacobs, but the stacks where Josh Jacobs falls past ADP significantly, 25, Gross. So there's probably
just to think through it a bit. If Adams is at the end of the first / start of the second, then you the only way you would get him is if you fell to the end of the third.
So that's
and you would be interested there.
Yeah, then I would do it. Yeah. So
that's a pretty natural, clean. Like he's not going to be in most of them, but maybe some.
Yeah, I love when the game gives you that kind of like governor on your frequencies that you should do things. Yeah,
I do think
that's appealing.
I do think we've had some people pretty upset to see Dotson in the bottom part of the chart. I think we have actually covered the commander situation in previous weeks, but just maybe to briefly touch on it. So his one problem for Dotson on this chart is that his A dot is not it's not the highest. So let me just his average depth of target has been the highest it's been is 10.3, and he's had some weeks with 8, 7.3, and then 10 and 10. So he hasn't really been targeted down the field. And then his target per route run, the base number hasn't been too great either. So it's been 18%, 10%, 11%, 21%, 9%. So sort of averaging out at 14% targets per route run. And it does feel like the Commanders they spread the ball out too much. And I know that sort of like sharp people have called out for listen, it's Dotson. He needs to, he's one of your best players, him and Terry McLaurin. They need to get the ball more. But I guess this chart is just telling us that it hasn't been like that. And super disappointing, just especially with his late surge in ADP. Definitely really disappointing. Let me check out Dotson's ADP. So he's now at the end of the 10th round.
So pretty close to Logan Thomas. And I was gonna say, just straight up, I think I prefer Logan Thomas for the tight end eligibility. I don't think they're super different in what they get in this offense. And so give me the guy with tight end eligibility.
Right. They're clearly prioritizing Logan Thomas over Dotson. Super disappointing. But and I think what's also interesting is in the context of Dotson wasn't a phenomenal prospect either. Where he was sort of behind who's the Broncos slot receiver, the fast slot receiver that we used to be excited about? KJ Hamler.
Oh, KJ Hamler.
KJ Hamler in Penn State, and didn't really do too much. And then when KJ Hamler graduated, then he had a big fourth year, our senior year, when he was kind of a little bit older. And so that's not obviously prospect profile isn't everything, but maybe in the context of he hasn't been the best here. That is sort of getting pretty concerning here that in his second year he's not commanding targets.
Yeah, I'm more in the camp of saying that this is the new normal for Dotson. It's not. Yeah, I'm not terribly optimistic for Dotson. The last one I wanted to hit on this chart was just Michael Pittman with the Anthony Richardson injury. His situation changing with Gardnew Minshew at quarterback. I do think we're going to see more passing volume just simply because there's less plays where there are going to be QB rushes. So I think Pittman, I'm not entirely sure if he ends up moving farther down the chart on the weighted targets per route run, but I do think you're going to get those targets to him slightly higher quality, right? I think it's fair to say that Minshew is going to be more accurate than Anthony Richardson from what we've seen from both of them. So I would expect that Pittman probably moves up a little bit as far as efficiency and his fantasy points per game. So that's one where he's looking. Honestly, I remember during draft season, drafting Michael Pittman always felt like God, I had to click Michael Pittman because I was going to get buried at wide receiver if I didn't, and it feel really yucky. I didn't want to do it. But he's looking like he was pretty appropriately priced. He might have even been a little underpriced in the market. So that's looking like a W for all the Michael Pittman drafters out there.
Right now, he's middle to fifth.
Okay,
which feels pretty not something that you can really take advantage of.
No, I mean I'm certainly not hitting him as hard as I'm hitting Jakobi Meyers later tonight.
Right. So yeah, let's move on to this sort of like the in-betweener chart, and this one where you've got guys who's 70 to 85% routes run. So same chart, but just players where they're not quite every down starters, but they are like you see a bunch of pretty clear-cut fantasy starters here, and I guess it's sort of interesting. The thing that I noticed right away is that Terry McLaurin is also in this part of the chart where he's sort of like in the regression part, where he hasn't been getting the targets, but he's just a little bit over 10 points a game, and probably some of that is like he's in the top bucket in route share, but it does call in the question, like what really are the Commanders doing when they're not using their wide receivers that much?
Yeah, I want to look at McLaurin. I'm pulling him up here in the PFF data. I want to say that part of it was in his weeks, the earlier weeks where he was coming back from the injury.
Yeah. That's a good call out. So his targets per out run started off as 12% week 1, 17% week 2, and week 3 and 4, 20 and 23%, and then last week 10%. So I guess if you're using a rolling 3 week, 18% is his normal, not weighted targets per out run. So still not really concentrated, and so that it is making me think that this is sort of feels like an offense where it's hard to be interested.
So might be, so if we're kind of thinking through like the offenses where they're less desirable, we touched on the Giants, talked about the Commanders, talked about the Broncos passing game. Do you say it's fair to kind of categorize those three together as, even though the quarterbacks, especially at their price, like, Sam Howell has delivered you a good spike week, and that's really all you could ask for a guy at the price that he was going at. And Russ has been fine, especially for his price, but it's really just the other weapons, the skill position players, I guess, really in the receiving game, because like Bijan Robinson has been good, and the Broncos running backs have been fine as a group. As an individual, it's been a little thin. The Giants haven't been good anywhere, but you think it's a good categorization of lump all three of those together.
I mean, obviously the Commanders and Broncos have had better offensive success, but just very it's not concentrating on anyone, so that makes it hard to really truly recommend any of these players for sure.
I didn't have a ton more on this chart. I guess Josh Downs, kind of the same discussion that we had about Michael Pittman. Interested in him potentially seeing more targets with Minshew, seeing higher quality targets. I think he's good. He's actually good. So that's one that I'm interested in. I'm going to rapid fire a couple guys. Michael Wilson had a come back down to earth game, just one target, whatever. But you know what? The Michael Wilson thesis of, hey, this is my random bring back guy for week 17 against the Eagles, and it's a rookie receiver and the Cardinals, probably will at least give him some run by then. the thesis looks clearly correct. Whether you get the result that you need in week 17, that's up to the gods of randomness. But, good analysis for the people that were saying Michael Wilson, just because he got one target this week doesn't mean anything. It's, hey, we saw the kind of game that he can deliver with the 2 touchdowns and lots of catches. That's all you really needed from the guy. So whatever, probably not super startable in like season-long fantasy, but definitely someone where if he was your last round best ball pick, you could have done worse.
Right. And it does feel like every year, people talk about like, hey, there's so much opportunity here. Like I want to be here. I this is something where it has to be somebody, and I'm gonna do it with this guy. And it does feel like we get those kind of hits every year, but it's easy to forget. It's happened more frequently this year, where those guys hit, but we also get a lot of those guys where it just didn't work at all. Like the Rashod Bateman pick, where like, oh, there's opportunity here, and he's just gonna fall into it, and they get cut, or it doesn't work, or like Van Jefferson is another example where people would have been drafting him highly because of the Cooper Kupp injury, and now he plays for the Falcons.
Yeah.
I'm with you where it is hard to like find a take here where we haven't discussed it already.
Yeah, I think we're good to move on to the last chart because there were a couple guys on this last one
that
I wanted to talk about.
Oh yeah, you go ahead.
So Christian Watson his weighted targets for route run is really high, especially for a guy seeing the amount of routes that he is. So I'm not entirely sure how I feel about Christian Watson. I feel like in that offense, like it's clear that someone has to do something because, right now this whole thing of none of them do anything like we saw on Monday, like that's not going to work. So someone's got to step up and do something, whether it's going to be one of the receivers or whether it really requires Aaron Jones coming back, I think is yet to be seen. From watching the game, really like all that Watson got was a deep target. And like, yeah, that's what you want. And it should have been a touchdown. It was a horse collar tackle. Honestly, it's kind of bullshit that like, I feel like there are plays like that where it's like, dude, that's a touchdown. Like you can't just foul a guy and have it not be a touchdown now. Like,
well,
I don't know.
That's what they're coached to do.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. 100%. I think the players are playing that optimally. It's just the rule is stupid. Like, if you're telling me that what I should do is potentially maim this man by horse collaring him, and that is the optimal way to play to win this game, fuck your rules. Those are some stupid rules. Like, shoot, if I was a player, be in that situation, I'm maiming away, baby. Let me maim him because otherwise it's a touchdown. So he should have had a huge splash touchdown play. To me, what you're looking at with Christian Watson is he needs to deliver games like that with those splash touchdown plays at a high enough frequency to pay off his 4th round cost. I don't think that's going to happen, is my early read on it. Just from seeing, I'm going to get ready to heat myself up a big helping of crow here for when he just jams it down my throat. But I don't think he's that good. I think he's, I watched a guy just like him in the XFL this season. And, I really don't think he's anything but Martavis Bryant. Like if you watch the last play of the game where a good player wins the game for Green Bay because he goes and makes a contested catch on an underthrown ball and just alphas that shit away from the defender, spikes the ball and walks off with a dub. Like Christian Watson just like looked like a little boy there and got alphaed by the defender and the dude picked it off and that's game, I don't know, man. Christian Watson, I don't think is actually that good. I think he's an athletic freak. I think he's still raw as a wide receiver. And so you're going to get hey, this is a super athletic guy who's fast as fuck and he'll score a breakaway touchdown every once in a while. Don't think it's a kind of player that I want to be paying. This is Gabe Davis on a worse offense, man. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing?
I mean, his usage stats were good. Like, he had 187 air yards, 24% targets per out run, 7 targets. So, like, good usage there. But then to only get 11.6 PPR points from that. I guess you could call some of it variance, that maybe if he adds the touchdown, like, you're if he has a touchdown, you're getting closer to 18 points there. But
a lot of the other targets were nothing burgers, though. It was like, here's Christian Watson 5 yards down the field, woo! Like on a play where the defense couldn't care less about giving him 5 yards. You know, like, I don't know. I'm fully ready to eat my crow on this, but yeah, I don't know.
I get it, where, like, maybe some of them are, like, really deep down the field. It's like you have 250-yard and then a bunch of, like, lower ADOT stuff. But 187, that's a lot of air yards. But it's if the distribution is working out like that, then those can often be players then where you don't actually get that good a score, because, like, getting 5 targets 20 yards down the field for 100 air yards is way better than, like, 170-yard bomb, and then for, like, whatever the remaining air yards divided by 4 is. So yeah, the distribution could definitely work against him there. So definitely understand that for sure.
That's very well put, and I feel like you explained my point in a much more intelligent way than Christian Watson bad. So thank you for that. I didn't have a ton of other guys on this chart to add, though. Did you have anyone else?
So just Christian Watson, still pick 51. So having to take him in the 5th round, which feels definitely rich for the information we've gotten on this offense, and definitely with, like, I mean, Christian Watson wasn't a great prospect, so definitely understand the point there.
Christian Watson at 51 couldn't be me.
Right, I didn't take very much this year, even though the weighted targets per out run were excellent last year, but it did feel just a little bit too rich given the overall profile. So Tank Dell up here, I think we've discussed that. Super excited. Zay Jones, the cheap Jaguar, sort of like not quite paying off, or not quite giving you something to be excited about, but would hope for a big week in the future. And I did notice that Sky Moore, he was available on waivers in our main event team, and he definitely looks like a player who should be available on waivers.
and on waivers, he shall remain.
But yeah, nothing else really compelling here, I don't think.
Well, do you? I know we went over 2 hours, so maybe we just do a quick, fun little thing here. But I did want to show off the BBM4 leaderboard that we've got up over at Spike Week now. It's like an actual leaderboard where you can see, you know, the whole teams of the players and the scores for each week and everything, and look at different combinations and cool stuff. I wanted to go through a couple here, maybe like the top team and a couple combos, but we did have a pretty long one here, but we'll kind of look at this real quick.
Okay. Do you know how to share a screen on this?
I think I'm doing it. Did I do it?
I think you did it.
All right. So this here is our premium leaderboard.
They have to zoom though.
Oh, you're right. Thank you. Let's well. There you go.
Okay.
So this is our premium leaderboard. If you have a Spike Week subscription, you can see this. You can do the leaderboard with players, which is just going to be like this. Really, what the premium lets you do is see specific weeks and like all the points and everything. So we'll do that one because that's the most fun. But I did want to look at the top team here. I do think, was it Steph? Did you get this guy to share his team over on Twitter? But now if we run into the random first place team and no one can suss the guy out on Twitter or figure out who he is, don't worry. We'll be able to see the team. So first place definitely has seen better days at quarterback with his Anthony Richardson going down. But, I mean, he's got all the usual suspects you'd expect on a first-place team with Puka and Kyron. He's got Mostert and Achan in there. Tyjae's exciting. The bully tight end, though, is very interesting. I'm pretty sure that this guy's just gonna wind up kind of dead at wide receiver here as the season goes on. Looks a little bit thin. A lot of 3 QB teams at the top right now. This team, though, this was one that I looked at earlier with the Josh Allen, Justin Fields. This one I do think is kind of dead, though, for first place because they're both week 13 buys. And like if you're trying to literally hit the nuts as the first overall highest scoring team in regular season, you got to have something crazy happen. Like basically this guy's out is he needs Mac Hollins to score enough to replace whatever, like anyone who'd have a good number of his combos covered, like his week 13 quarterback score that he misses out on. He needs Mac Hollins or like Chase Brown to score, like one of these guys that's not, you see this 8% owned here. That shows the frequency with which they were drafted. So a player that's drafted in every draft will be 8%. Anyone under that is, you can see basically as a proportion. So this guy was drafted in 5 out of every 8 drafts, basically, kind of a quick way to do that. But yeah, we don't have to scroll through too many here. I didn't see anyone that I recognized from like Deposit Kingdom or Ship Chasing here at the very top. But if you're wanting to play around with this, I was having a lot of fun earlier. You can toggle through 500 lineups here at a time and have them all be displayed. If you're not wanting to look at all the players, you can do up to 1,000 at a time. Just kind of flip through them really quick. Find yourself. If you are a Spike Week member, you get your little Spike Week thing there. And then if you're wanting to search for yourself, like let's see, do I have any between 7,000? Oh, okay. This doppelganger name guy, this Sack Dance character. What's he rocking here? Oh, we went all the way back to the start. We're not gonna go through all that trouble again. But I keep seeing this guy on the leaderboards, and I was looking up his exposures as well. He's got like all the same overweight positions as me. I gotta find this character. Steph, are you up in the top 500? We'll pull you up here. Oh,
I am actually curious where Walrus Balls is.
Walrus Balls is still pretty high up. Ooh, okay. So Steph's rocking place 475 here. Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love. That was a really nice start that you got from Jordan Love to get those, especially when Hurts is having some of the lower scoring weeks. Etienne, B-Rob, Warren, Achan. That's really nice. The Chandler stuff, you're feeling a little thinner there now with Akers there. But I mean, your wide receivers are also so nasty. The Mike Williams one is pretty painful though. That's going to be really hard to be live for first place. It's just so tough. You basically have to hit the nuts. Like we were talking about this earlier with respect to the drafters format, but like teams with Justin Jefferson and drafters, you're dead. Like, sorry, no first place for you. Teams with Achan and drafters, you're dead. Unlucky. Like you pretty much have to hit the perfect nuts. So getting a dead player like that with that amount of draft capital, the only way that I would see this team being like actually live for first is you get Chandler to come on because he's only a 6% owned player, and you get Michael Wilson to do some stuff. But if you got like a legitimate Michael Wilson season, then this is a really, really strong team. I mean, it's probably not to mush you, but this is probably a lock to advance. Like, it looks really strong. So that's an awesome team. Oh yeah, very, very valid point that Addison might ascend enough with J. Jeff out. But yeah, that's a very fun team. And then, like, if you wanted to see, for example,
Sorry, I gotta run pretty soon.
Okay, we'll wrap it up here. But like, if you want to see player combos, we've got all that stuff over here. You can see their draft rate, the QBs they were stacked with. Interesting that Justice Hill was stacked the most with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. But I'll let you guys fiddle around with this. All the tournament info, tournament DB, and the free version of the leaderboards. Go check those out. Really fun and cool to play around with the actual BBM4 leaderboard. But for everyone that managed to make it for 2.25 hours, we appreciate you. Hope you got some good alpha from the show. And we will see you next week at the usual time of Tuesday night at 5 o'clock. But
8 p.m. Eastern.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm
Pacific bullshit.
I'm on the Best Coast time. But thanks, guys, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.